for Ireland underage levels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My first cap, it was in the last few months of the pre-Brian Kerr era.
Okay.
I played for the under-18s against Finland in Tolka Park. A couple of months after I moved to England first. Which is a hell of a start to my career in England, because I remember going, okay, I'm a professional footballer now. Now I'm a youth international. I've just worn the jersey and I've played, and I think life is pretty sweet at this point. And a few injuries kept me out of the under-18 European Championship finals. I had to sit and watch that on telly rather than go to it. I played in a couple of youth tournaments and loved it. And it was really because it was, first of all, right, you're playing for your country, which you assume is going to be enjoyable. Yeah. But what made it even more of an experience or a thrill or a privilege, I don't know, put your own word in. Brian and Noel O'Reilly working together. I knew Noel from Belvedere. They were just so different from how everyone else that I worked at in football were. And they this knack of, like, we'd be playing against really big nations, and he'd have a speech beforehand. I don't know, I've never asked him whether he put a lot of time into preparing this or whether it was off the cuff, but you'd leave the dressing room genuinely believing that, you know, if those Italians or French lads had the choice, they'd be in our jersey.
And we got a flavour of that from talking to Rob, because he said Noel O'Reilly was a great Belvedere man for him as well, and the way he sort of described his days with the two of them was, they hadn't got these sort of coaching badges and all. It was whatever they had, the experience they brought, the way they were able to speak, and
there was a. I work with teenagers now and in a different area, and so they're all working with us when we're teenagers, but they had that thing of, we all wanted to be in his gang, or that phrase, I want him to like me, I want him to respect me, because I sure as hell respect him, and if I'm on the right side of him when I'm doing something right. There was that kind of thing, and that's really, it's hard to define or explain why.
Robbie couldn't deal with it.
It's hard, like you can't maybe describe it, but he had that thing of just connecting with an entire dressing room of very different personalities, and then you want to go out and kill someone from.
So just while we're we're talking about Brian, do you think he has any value now that he's on the outside of Irish football, or is his time gone? Or
it's a hell of, you use the phrase there, on the outside of Irish football. It's a hell of a shame that someone like Brian could be described as someone who's on the outside of Irish football. I agree with you. That he's not. I don't think a role at a League of Ireland club interests him. I think the FAI in its current guise, run by the people it's currently run by and operated in the way it's run by, doesn't deserve Brian, and Brian knows that.
But it's a shame, isn't it?
It's an awful shame. Like we're not that big a country with that many people who've won youth international tournaments, who's experienced at senior management, who's run clubs here, who's managed clubs here, who, if you named any player born in the last 40 years, Brian would be able to tell you what he's good at, what he needs to improve on, and his personality tendencies, and how to get at him or how to motivate him. He's this freakish retention of knowledge.
Why do we discard people like that?
Well, in Brian's specific case, his contract wasn't renewed in the senior management role, and it was handled very badly. And I think there was a personality clash between him and the hierarchy at the time, and that was never addressed. And I think, not to simplify things, but you could whittle it down to that. Okay. I think while the FAI was being run by certain people, they wouldn't have wanted Brian back in under their roof, demanding things improve, demanding standards, calling them out on their bullshit. Nor would Brian want to sit there and have to answer to these people. So you could understand it from both point of views, but the upshot of it all is the rest of us are losing out. Irish football has had to get by with Brian being someone who's just in the media shining light about the whole game to the rest of us, rather than being in a dressing room or in the FAI actually implementing things.
So your cap, your senior cap, what was it like to walk out? And,
I'm smiling here already.
Yeah. And, I mean, that's every kid's dream, isn't it?
It was my dream.
Yeah, it was my dream as well.
And like you asked earlier, who did I want to be?
Yeah.
I never had a team I wanted to play for. I never had a player I wanted to be. But I wanted to play. I wanted to play for Ireland, and I wanted to play in Wembley. And those are the two things really that stuck out. But like I remember, so we were playing against Russia. I remember running up and down the touchline. Mick had made a good few changes, and every time someone gets, is he calling me?
Yeah.
And
you nearly sit beside the manager sometimes.
Well, yeah. So and you're going, and you know, if it's me, if he calls me, I go from being someone who wants to play for Ireland to being someone who has played. And like 10-year-old me would have given all everything. There's nothing else higher on the priority list for 10-year-old me than to have this experience. And then I remember getting the call. I was down at the corner stretching or whatever, and Ian Evans goes, come up. And so I went up, and so Robbie came off and I went on for him with about 18-19 minutes to go. And it's this weird thing, because in the one hand you're going, well, I've done this every weekend or every day of my life. I'm just playing football, and I'm going to go in a position that I've done every weekend since I'm a kid. So on the one hand, no big deal. But on the other hand, you go, this is an Ireland jersey I'm wearing, and there's Staunton and Quinn is there, and Roy Keane is there, and McAteer, and lads who were a level above what I was playing at a club level, and I loved it. Like I loved it. And when like I'm thinking a lot about Jack Byrne lately. Yeah. A 23-year-old Dublin-born fella makes his debut for Ireland in Lansdowne Road in a friendly. That's exactly what I did. And I remember at the time going, this is going to be the first of others. And you assume it's going to be, you hope it's going to be. It didn't turn out that way for me for whatever reasons. And I remember actually when I finished, I hated being described as a former Ireland international.
Did you? I described as that.
Well, I because I thought I'm a one cap and it was friendly. I know this phrase, one cap wonder. It's this derogatory way of describing people who they've had a look at but they don't want to see again. And I used to hate it actually when I'd be sitting next to John Giles or Liam Brady, and the presenter would introduce us as former Ireland internationals, which technically we all are. The presenter isn't lying, but I'm sitting there going, no, I shouldn't get the same description as John Giles. Liam Brady and myself, you need something to distinguish the two of us. So I remember thinking at the time, feeling a bit embarrassed or a bit bashful about the whole thing. And for years I used to feel sorry for myself that the cap I had, or that the injury I had, came 3 weeks after the cap. Now, the only thing I'm focused on is that the cap came 3 weeks before the injury, because that was the last game that I was physically fit enough to play in, and I got to play. And great. The injury happened, it was always going to happen, but just before the door closed, stuck my toe in and got to play. I got my cap in the middle of February, and then just less than 3 weeks later I hurt my hip on a Saturday, and that just started a decline. It wasn't even a free kick. It wasn't a foul. It happened about 10 or 12 minutes into the game away against Barnsley, and I thought, it was a shooting pain in my hip. But I generally, in most games and most training, I'd have some pain, something, and the trick is to know, okay, well this is more than a niggle, I'm not fit today, or is this just a niggle, I'll be grand. And I was always trying to struggle to find the right answer to that. But anyway, this one I just thought, this is just something I can run off. And I lasted the rest of the game, and I was in bits by the end. But on the Sunday morning, couldn't train. Monday, I couldn't train. But we had a game Tuesday night, and it was an important game. And I want to play. And so they gave me a few injections, and 12 minutes into the game, I came off. And I went to the surgeon, and he said, this requires surgery. I was like, okay, I get what you're saying, but we're going to get promoted here. We've big games coming up. I've just got a cap. I know I'm getting called up to the next international. this isn't the time, this isn't the right time for me, and you're talking surgery, I'll be grand. And he goes, okay, right, well, here's what you do if that's what you want to do. And it was just, you're trying to get the sweet spot between getting enough rest that you don't make the injury worse, but training enough that actually you can play. And that was, I tried that for a few weeks, got nowhere, got worse. So then I had to stomach and go, okay, I need the operation. So I had the operation in the April of 2002. And when I woke up, your man goes to me, I was on my own. You know, the doctor does his round. I don't know if you've had operations. And he comes in and goes, so I wake up, I'm half groggy from all the thing. I says, how did it go? And he gives me some spiel, medical talk. He says, you know, your hip is X, Y, and Z, and we did this, and we did that. And I said, no. When can I play again? And he says, best case, 12 weeks. I said, all right, grand. And I just honed in on the phrase, best case. And I went, okay, well, while I have you, what's worst case? And he goes, worst case is you'll never play again. And I went, ever? And I said, what's the chances of that? And I was shocked.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And he goes, about 25%. And all right, okay. And then I don't know what he said after that, because that's all I could think of. And off he went in his round to the other patients. I decided not to repeat that conversation to anyone, not even the medical team at Millwall. Yeah. For some reason I thought the surgeon wouldn't tell the physio, but obviously he did. Yeah. So I thought, do you know, like a lot of problems, if you don't talk about it, it doesn't exist. And if I talk about it, it makes it more real. If I make it more real, it's more likely to happen. So I said, I'm going to pretend this didn't happen and just deny the existence of this possibility. And then I never got back, and I had to go back for another surgery. But even before I had that operation, I was in the room. Surgeon says, couple of options. One, you have this surgery, but it's much more radical. You're going to be in much more long-term pain. At most, you'll play till your late 20s, but you're going to have blah, blah, blah. But the other option, I said, what's the other option? He says, the other option is you don't have it and you retire. Well, obviously we're going with option A. So I didn't care. When you're 23 or 24, you don't care what you're going to feel like when you're 40. That's another world. So I had it, and it didn't work. Okay. But I spent overall 18 months trying to outrun, or just to this possibility or probability of retiring. So I'm not going to talk about it, let alone tell you how I feel about it. Forget that. Blokes don't do that. Footballers don't do that. And then, so I didn't even tell anyone. The morning I retired, it's mad that I did this. I went in, I was living with a mate of mine and my girlfriend at the time, and I had an agent, and obviously my family really involved in my career. I didn't tell any one of them. One of my best mates in the team, I just went into training on a Wednesday morning. I knew 8 days earlier that I was done. I knew before that I was done. And I just called the medical team, the physio, says, have you got a word? And I spent an hour in the room with him and the doctor. And I walked out of that office, having retired. And I walked home and just sent everyone a text. And still, even in the text, it was blah, 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 blah. Don't ring me, I can't be arsed talking about it. It was still this thing of, I don't want to talk about problems, because talking about this problem isn't going to undo the problem, so what's the point? Why be the bloke to bring everyone down? So I just kept all the really negative stuff.
But in that space, how was Richard Sadlier?
I was heartbroken. And it's sometimes you even think that term doesn't describe it fully. Because I had the view of myself and the view of the world that I had at the time was that you couldn't do anything more important or enjoyable or fulfilling than football. And I also thought, well, I can't do anything else anyway. So I'm now 24. I genuinely believe this. This sounds really dramatic. I'll never be happy again. No matter what I do, it'll just be going through the motions. And that's if I do anything anyway, because I'm probably unemployable, I have no skills of any kind. And the feeling I have is never going to go away. Ever. Because the feeling I have is because I retired, and retirement is now not reversible, so this is me. Exactly. But I also, a weird thing happened at the same time. A cousin of mine, who was only a couple of years older, died. And within a month of me retiring, 2 days after I retired, I went up to Newcastle Hospital to visit him, and he had a heart and he'd a operation, and he was lying in the bed, and he was topless, and he'd all kind of, I remember seeing all wires and stuff, and I was talking to his mum, like my auntie outside, and it was looking like he wouldn't wake up. It was looking like he wouldn't survive, and I'd retired 2 days earlier. So the newspapers and my friends were full of, this is devastating, this poor young lad, what he could have been. And I was in hospital looking at my cousin going, this is devastating, this is a tragedy. But even though I knew that, it didn't change a thing about how I felt.
Of course, yeah.
So what I had this weird thing of going, I have some perspective that things can be worse, but in my head and in my world, this is as bad as it gets. So all I did was, I just said, well, I'm not going to tell everyone how bad I feel, because I know it's a bit skewed. So I just felt miserable and angry and full of self-pity and full of regret, full of poor me, but didn't let it on to anyone.
So to bury all that pain, what did Richard Sadlier do?
Drink, take drugs.
Okay.
No one's going to drug test me anymore, so I'll throw myself into that. Because drinking and taking drugs really works if what you want to do is numb the pain. The bigger question to everyone is, well, why are you in pain? Can we manage this pain in another way? But when you're in it at the time, it's the quick fix. And it's also, you have people around you going, you deserve it, like, have your few pints. Sure, haven't you been disciplined? All this kind of stuff. We support each other in our excessive drinking. It's culturally what we do. So I didn't think there was anything wrong at the time. So that was my approach for a long, long time, to be honest.
So was there ever a point in your life, did it ever get so dark, you say, the pain is just fucking too much, suicidal ever?
It would have been. I remember leading up to the Christmas in 2003. So I was in the throes of my own personal torment, but I'd gotten a job, and I'd done some media work, so everyone's like going, this fella's, he's dealt with it really well, and he's got a job, and what an example, isn't it? Brilliant. But I wasn't telling anyone what was going on. So I've said this before, actually. I contacted a solicitor, I did up a will, I did insurance payments coming, so I had an intention. Because again, I thought, well, how I feel now is how I'm going to always feel. And that's no life. And a lot of people can relate to that. Where you think that the shit you're in now, you'll never get out of it. And you don't realise that it's short term. It really hurts, it's really painful, but you can access treatment and support, and you can get out of it. And at the time, I wasn't in a world where people spoke like that. They were like, come on, we go for pints. Here's a line of coke. Come on, you'll be grand. But I didn't act on it. Actually, around the time I went to therapy. And for years I wouldn't even admit that. I would say to people, I went to see a sports psychologist.
Good name.
Blokey, it's a sport. I'm a sports person. Sports psychology is no big deal. It's fine. And that really helped. Again, in a really simple way, it's just that thing of going, okay, I'm going to drop the act. I'm just going to tell you how I feel. I'm going to describe honestly what it's like to be in my shoes.
And isn't there a great sense of relief? Like, your problems don't go away, obviously, but it's just it's like a pressure valve, isn't it?
It does, because like, no matter what you're tormenting yourself with, if you don't tell anyone else about it, you don't get the benefit of anyone else's perspective. So where I was sitting there going, okay, my life is over. My life is, it's going to be relentlessly shite. And the good days will just be vanilla at best. I'm never going to feel what I felt on a pitch. There's no point. But if you never say that out loud, and you don't get someone else to come back at you and say, okay, well, do you know what you said, you can't do anything? Well, what are the skills or the characteristics that you applied in the world of football that you think helped? So you go, oh, okay, right, well, I'm quite hard working, and I'm disciplined, I can persevere with stuff, and I can work with people, and I can work under pressure, and so this term transferable skills was told to me. that what works in one area can work elsewhere. So I thought, right, okay, right, so I am potentially of use to the world. And even that little slight thing, we go, okay, right, there's a change in attitude there. So, and then it just started. Now, it wasn't a kind of wary of, when you're telling people about your life, telling your story, you can hang too much importance on certain phrases or conversations, and like it was like a light bulb moment. And it wasn't like that. It was like years and years of struggling and years of all that stuff and feeling huge amounts of pain and making stupid decisions and impacting other people and regretting even more other stuff. But that was just the way it went for me for a long, long time.
Okay. When did Richard Sadlier consider going down the route that you are now in your psychotherapy, your sports science, and had you touched for education as a kid, or was it all your problems that you?
No, I after hearing that my hip injury was a potential career ender, myself and one of the other lads at Millwall started to do a sports science degree. It was run by the PFA, so the timing of it was outside generally training hours. After that, didn't do anything for years. And then in my early 30s, I just thought I'd follow just a little gut feeling I had, that I was just drawn to the whole area of psychotherapy, because I'd gotten so much help myself as a client of therapy. So I thought, Jesus, I wonder what it's like being in that chair. So I started to study it and loved it. And when I started doing it, I loved it. And it was just, I just followed that thing. Exactly like when I was a kid, and I just liked playing football. It wasn't so much about, I wasn't doing it as a kid so that it would get me a job when I was an adult. I did it because I liked it. And it's the same with therapy. I just did it because I liked it. And the more I did it, the more I liked it, and the more I got out of it. And that's why I keep doing it.
Okay. So how's life?
Brilliant. I've had a really difficult, a very intense year. I've written a book which is out in a couple of weeks, which I decided early on that I would go all in on this thing. I've read books where you read it and at the end you don't really know much more about the person. It's like a collection of match reports. I thought, well, that's not the kind of book that I want to write, nor do I think anyone wants to read that from me. But what that meant was I had to revisit lots of different things I'd been through. And at times it was great to compare how I am now to those moments, and I was bursting with gratitude, going, I don't feel like that now. But the flip side was, in order to write in any kind of detail about challenging, difficult things, I had to really go back there.
There's a cost to it, isn't it?
Yeah. The high personal cost at various points in the year. But what I've gotten from the process, if that book never hit the shelf, if no one ever read it, if the publishers burned down in the morning and said, actually, I'd still be absolutely delighted and so grateful for the things I got from the process. This will probably make more sense when you read it, but to get to the point I am now, where I'm really comfortable with people, with talking about the things I've been through, with people knowing the things I've been through, and not to be riddled with, Jesus, what's Keith going to think of me when he knows X, Y, and Z? Whereas for years I was like that. I wouldn't talk about what I was going through or what I'd been through or what I thought about myself and blah blah blah, because I was afraid I'd be judged or rejected or mocked or gossiped about. I don't have any of those fears now. It's a lovely thing to go.
Yeah, because fear of rejection can hold us back a lot.
Yeah, you just go, this is my life story, and I've wrapped it up in a book. Read it or don't read it. Enjoy it or not. Slag me, don't. But
here it is.
This is where I am, and that's where you are, and there's room for us all in the world.